welcome back to another video. Today I am going to tell you guys about the time I was in the hospital, which I've already done this kind of video, but the thing is, when I did those videos I was under the assumption that I was in the hospital for 5 months, but in reality I was in the hospital for 5 weeks. But I just did the math just today, and it's been 13 years. In November, sometime in November, I was diagnosed with transverse myelitis and was thrown into a world of chaos, pretty much. And I was 13 at the time that it happened. And I just now realizing how long it's been and how long I've been in this position. Like, I used to keep track of how long I've been in this position, but now I'm just like, whatever. But now doing the math and realizing it's been 13 flipping years, I don't know how to feel about it. I'm gonna start from the beginning and tell you guys the full story again, even though I told it already in 2-ish videos. I think I mentioned this in a couple of videos, but anyways, we're gonna start from the very beginning and start from the day before I went into the hospital. The day before I went into the hospital, there was nothing wrong with me. I was fine all day. I was out running around with my friends, having a blast, playing in the snow, you know, doing kid stuff. And then that night I went in to sleep and I had this horrible nightmare. I can remember this nightmare very vividly. I was being attacked by a guy in a mask. He was wearing all black. He had a knife in his hand and he slammed me up against the wall, and he just sat there stabbing at my back repeatedly. I didn't understand what was going on at the time, and I woke up kind of terrified and scared. And then to realize that the pain that I was feeling in my dreams was actually the pain that I was feeling in real life. And it was scary. I was like, what's going on? And I like calmed myself down and I'm like, you know what, I'll just go sleep out on the couch. It's nothing, it was probably nothing. So I got down off, I was on the top bunk. Me and my sister shared a room. I was on the top bunk and she was on the bottom bunk because she was terrified that she would fall off. So I got off the top bunk and I started walking in to go to the living room. Realized I had to go to the ladies' room and turned around, and I realized when I turned around I felt off balance. So to keep myself from falling over, I put my hands on the side of the wall. The walls were so close that you could just put your arms out and you could touch both walls. So I used the walls to balance myself and to walk down the long hallway to the bathroom. I got to the bathroom and I lost everything. From the waist down, I was completely paralyzed. And I was about to fall, but I caught myself and lowered myself to the ground. I knew something was off when I started to feel kind of wobbly and off steady, so I knew to prepare to catch myself just in case if I fall. And somehow I knew, and I caught myself and I lowered myself to the ground, and I sat there and I'm like, this is not okay, this is not right, something's terribly wrong. So I'm like, I need to wake up my mom. And I didn't want to wake up my dad, I just wanted my mom. And so I army crawled to their room and I got in, and now, I thought I knew what side my mom slept on, but I was totally wrong. And I ended up grabbing my dad's foot, and he jumped awake, which takes a lot to wake up my dad. Like, he's a very heavy sleeper, so it takes a lot to wake him up. But that night I grabbed his foot and he woke up, and kind of like in like army voice, kind of like, who's there kind of voice. Sorry. And I'm like, it's me, Alicia, your daughter. I can't feel my legs. And he woke up my mom, and they both got up and they turned on the light. And the thing is, when I lost everything from the waist down, I lost my bathroom, so I ended up messing myself. And they're like, oh my god, what's going on? And they didn't understand what was going on. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I was scared and shaking. And they're like, it's okay, Alicia, don't freak out. And so they lift me up and they sat me on their bed, and my mom started kind of rubbing my legs and was and they were asking me questions, and I'm like, I don't know, I have this terrible pain in my back. Even though I was paralyzed from the waist down, I still had pain in my back. So they were trying to like rub my legs and hoping maybe I just slept wrong, and they just fell asleep, but that wasn't the case. And then my dad is like, well, we have to get her changed and get her cleaned up, so he carried me into the bathroom. My mom helped me get undressed, and then I like put myself into the bathtub after my mom ran the bath, and I cleaned up, and then my mom helped me out of the bath and got me dressed, and then my dad came in and carried me all the way down the hallway to the couch, laid me out on the couch, and they went back to sleep. They said if I'm still the same way in the morning, that they'll call the ambulance. Now, my parents regret that decision that they both made at that time, which I can understand why they regretted it, but I do not blame them for their decision that they made at that point in time. They felt they told me both that if they both took they took it seriously and called 911 immediately, then maybe I would have been better off. Like, I would want to be in my position that I am in right now. But I feel like no matter how fast they responded to it, no matter how fast they got me into the hospital, I would still be the way I am today. So I don't blame them for what they did that day. Anyways, so they both went back to sleep, and I laid on the couch, and I was in excruciating pain. I couldn't even sleep. It kind of felt kind of TMI for boys, but for girls you might get it. It kind of felt like period pain, like you were menstruating super badly, and it was a killer, and I just could not sleep. And my dad woke up, the sun was just coming up, my dad got up and he came out in his hunting gear, and he's like, so how are you feeling? And I told him, still the same, Dad. So he's like, okay, I'll go talk to your mom and see what she wants me to do. I'm like, okay. He comes back out and he's like, oh, well, your mom told me to go hunting, and then if you're still the same, when she wakes up, then she'll call 911 and I can go hunting. I'm like, okay, bye. So he went off hunting. Now, me and my dad has a really strained relationship, and I feel like him doing that made me feel like he really didn't care all that much, because here I am, kind of paralyzed from the waist down. I can't feel anything. I'm in excruciating pain, but yet he decides to go hunting. Now, you think father would see his child like that, and he was like, you know what, I'm not going hunting, I'm staying home and being there to help you and stuff like that. But no, he decided that day that he was gonna go hunting no matter what. So he up and left and went hunting. So I was laying there, kind of still in pain, not knowing what the hell was going on. I don't know how I felt at that time, because a lot of my memories that I have about that time is kind of foggy, and everything from my past is kind of foggy as well because my disability kind of messed with my head. So like my brain is like it. I have really bad memory, and I can't really remember or recall on something. Sometimes there will be like certain things that will like jog my memory, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that and stuff like that. But yeah, so I have like a really bad memory because of my disability, and so I can't remember exactly how I felt around that time of everything that was going on. I think I probably felt really scared and worried about what was going to happen. But anyway, so my mom woke up I think it was like an hour later, and she came out, and she's like, how you feeling, honey? And I told her, and she's like, okay. She's like, go down. I think she even told me she was gonna call 911, but I don't remember that part. I don't I don't know. Like that part is kind of fuzzy of that whole conversation between my mom. But I'm like, but I remember the part where she told me to crawl down to their room, army crawl down to the room and get on their bed. And I remember crawling to their bedroom, and I didn't know how I was gonna get up on the bed because the bed was like high up and I was like down on the ground, and I'm like, how am I gonna get from here to there? So I was like trying to figure it out, and luckily my parents are kind of messy people. We're kind of messy people. I'm a messy person, so I get it from both of them. But they had like bags of clothes that I think they were giving away, but they haven't gotten around to it yet. So luckily that played in my favor, and I crawled up on those bags, and then I flopped onto their bed, and I like legitly planted myself in the middle of the bed because I couldn't after putting myself in the middle of the bed, I couldn't get the energy to move myself anymore. I was like completely drained at that point, so I'm like, it's good enough. So my mom came in, and she put pillows behind my back to sit me up, and she turned on the TV because they had cable in their room, and she's like, what do you want to watch? I'm like, I don't know, put on Nickelodeon or something, because at the time I was 13, I kind of still watched little kids shows. So she's like, alright, so she turned on, pretty sure I was watching SpongeBob SquarePants when the people showed up, the ambulance people showed up. Anyway, so she turned it on, and I was sitting there watching SpongeBob SquarePants, minding my own business. All of a sudden, the door comes open, and I'm just like, what the hell? Because I kind of forgot that my mom was calling 911. So the ambulance people came in, and they're like asking me a whole bunch of questions. I was kind of freaking out. My mom's like, it's okay, Alicia. I called the ambulance people. They're here to help you. And I was like freaking out because I didn't, I don't know, because it kind of just like she just like legitimately told me that she was gonna be calling the ambulance, and I totally forgot within the span of that whole conversation. And that's scary. That your memory is just up and disappeared like that. But anyways, so they ended up rushing me off to the hospital, and there was like this one point that scared me the most when they were taking me out of the house, is because we live in a trailer, so our trailer we didn't have like a separate room for the washing machines, so they were like in the hallway. So to get me out, they couldn't just bring me out like normally, like how they do, and like how they take people out on stretchers. So they had to lift me up above their heads, and I was like this close to the ceiling. I was like super close to the ceiling, and I'm like, I'm a little too close to the ceilings for my liking. And they're like, you need to sit completely still. You cannot move at all, or else we will drop you. And I'm like, don't worry, I will not move a muscle. And I didn't move a muscle, and they got me out. And I remember when they brought me out, I looked around and everyone in the freaking trailer park. When you live in a trailer park, everyone knows your business whether you want them to or not. It's ridiculous. I didn't like living in a trailer park. So when I came out, everyone in the whole trailer park had to be newsy and come and see what was going on. And I'm like, oh great. And there was this girl, her name was Stephanie. She lived right across she lived like right next door, and she came over and she's like, oh my god, Alicia, what's going on? What happened? And I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to the hospital. And they rushed me off to the hospital. And I remember being in the ambulance, and the guy did an IV, and I'm like, I don't want an IV, and they're like, we gotta do an IV, I'm sorry, we gotta do it. And I'm like, okay. And my mom, she was up front, and she's like, Alicia, give me your hand and I'll hold it. So I was like this, holding on to my mom's hand, and the guy did the IV, and of course I was looking off this way because it was this hand, my right hand, and I'm like, and I start crying, and Mom's like, oh, you're okay. I'm like, I know, but it hurts. And they're like, sorry. And I'm like, it's alright. So we got to the hospital, and the moment I got into the hospital, things were happening so flipping fast. I didn't even know what was going on half the freaking time, and they were talking to me. They were asking me a whole bunch of freaking questions. I don't even remember half the questions that they were asking me, but I know they were asking a lot of questions. What happened the day before, blah, blah, blah. Like, they were just like, oh, have you been in an accident? Has this anything happened with your spine, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know what happened. I don't know why this is happening. And then my mom brought up a great point. She's like, there was this girl in her school who slammed her up against the wall. Now, I told you guys that story. If you guys have seen it, go and check it out if you want. But a girl slammed me up against the wall, and they think because when she did that, it did damage to my spine, but it was dormant. And then probably something when I was outside running around doing something, I probably smacked my back again, and I didn't realize it. And it decided to become undormant and just paralyzed me. And so I remember they asked me a whole bunch of questions. They did a whole bunch of tests. They were poking at my feet, sliding this thing up and down my foot, and asking me if I could feel it. And I'm like, no, I don't feel that. They were drawing blood. They were taking me to x-rays. They were taking me to CAT scans. They stuck a long needle in my back, which was excruciating. Now, I was feeling pain before, but this was like 10 times worse, maybe even more. It was horrible, absolutely freaking horrible. I was crying my eyes out. I was holding my mom's hand, and I legitimately almost passed out because I was not breathing. I was crying so hard I couldn't physically breathe. And they're like, Alicia, you need to breathe or else you're going to pass out. So I'm like, and like I didn't take a deep breath, but I guess I started breathing. But I remember kind of being like dull-eyed and just like laying there. And my mom's like, oh, my mom was like sitting there crying. I remember looking at her, and she's crying, and she's like, it's almost over with, I'm so sorry you have to go through this, I love you. And I'm like, I love you too, Mom. And then I'm like, oh, please don't cry, Mom. I remember I told her, I'm like, don't cry, I don't want you to cry. But she cried anyways. And then I don't even remember when my dad even came into the picture, but I remember, I think it might be an hour later, and my dad showed up. And then they had to explain to him what the hell was going on and whatnot. And then the doctor finally came in. I think it was like a whole hour of just questions and taking and doing tests. A whole hour of tests and asking questions. So I remember that whole hour of agony, and then finally it just died down suddenly. Like, it went completely dead. And I remember laying in bed watching TV, and I remember I couldn't eat either. Like, they wouldn't let me eat, and I was like starving. I hadn't had breakfast, and around the time that they finally stopped the test, it was around noontime. I'm not positive, but I know it was like it was early in the morning. And then it took probably an hour, or maybe less, to get to Syracuse, and then an hour or two doing tests, and then by the time everything was settled, it was around noontime, and I was starving. I had no breakfast. Here it's lunchtime, and I still haven't eaten, and I asked, can I eat? And they're like, no, you can't eat yet. And I'm like, so I was being fed through a tube, like not a tube like in my stomach or in my mouth or anything, but like a tube that's in my hand, like the IV. I was being fed through an IV drip, and I'm like, seriously, that's all you're giving me for food? And here I am starving, my stomach's growling, and I'm like, I can't eat anything. I was so annoyed. So I was like, done with it. I was like, I don't even want to talk to anyone because they won't let me eat. So the doctor came in and he told my mom what he pulled my dad and my mom out of the room first and talked to them. And then I remember my mom walking in and she was crying, and I didn't understand why she was crying, of course. So I'm like, what's going on? Why are you crying, Mom? And then they told me I had transverse myelitis and I'm paralyzed from the waist down. And transverse myelitis means that you have a spinal cord injury. You might stay paralyzed, but we're going to start therapy to be able to get you back up and walking, to see if we can get it so where you're not paralyzed anymore. Like, try to get me up and walking. And I don't think it really clicked. Like, I don't know how I felt at that moment. Like I said, I seriously don't remember. I just remember staring at the doctor for a while, and I was just like, oh, okay, so when do I start physical therapy? I remember like saying that. I'm like, so when do I start physical therapy? And he's like, not right away, but we will get you in as soon as possible. After that conversation, I was in that room for a little bit longer, and then they moved me from the room that I was in to another area so they can open that room because it was like a room for like people to get checked out or get tested or whatever. I don't know. It was you couldn't sleep in that room, so they moved me to an area where I can stay not permanently, because I remember moving a couple of times. So I was like in this one area for maybe a week, maybe a week, and then I moved rooms again, and I was in this other room for I think another week, and then I was moved once again to this other room, which I spent the rest of my time. And that was the floor where it was like, okay, she's almost close to getting out and going home. So I was finally on the floor where I was going to be most likely going home. But like, I remember I was on one floor for maybe a week or two, then I was on this other floor for a week or two, and then I was finally on this other floor where I was going to eventually go home. And then I just remember doing a lot of physical therapy. I remember being super tired a lot, not wanting to do anything. I remember running away from the doctor or the physical therapy every time when they came to get me, because I was so tired of it. I didn't want to do it, but they said if you don't do it, then you won't be able to get up and walking. I just remember being very lonely a lot of times because my mom, she was there sometimes, but sometimes she couldn't be there because she had to take care of my brother and my sister who were still at home. So, and my mom, she was doing everything she could. She was like running from her job to home to home to the hospital to home, and she was just running freaking pretty much everywhere. And so there was times where she could stay with me, and then there's some times where she couldn't stay with me. She stayed with me when she had days off, but other than that, she couldn't really stay with me. My dad, he was of course a truck driver. He still is a truck driver, but his truck driving now is where he can be home every single night. Where back then, when he was a truck driver back then, he was gone he was gone for weeks on end. Like, he would go to faraway places and then stay overnight, and sometimes he will be gone for a week or two. So he wasn't home every single night like he is now. So I was pretty much in the hospital alone when my mom wasn't there. My mom, she was always there for me. She became my nurse and did everything for me, which I'm very thankful for. My dad spent one night with me throughout the whole entire time I was in the hospital. My mom, she spent the night with me, like, not all the time, but like more than my dad, that's for sure. My mom, she would call like my cousin or my aunt and be like, hey, can you go and be there for when Alicia wakes up? If you can you spend time with Alicia so she's not stuck in the hospital all alone? So I was in the hospital for the 5 weeks, and I had my cousins and my aunts coming in and out some days, and some days it was just like me all by myself on my lonesome. And I remember those days just dragging, and I hated it, and I hated it. But I was that girl who got a lot of stuffed animals and who had stuffed animals all up inside her bed. Like, I had stuffed animals on my left side, on my right side, behind me. I had stuffed animals on a shelf next to my bed. I was like the stuffed animal girl. And I remember them always, like, it wasn't always like physical therapy, but I remember I had to get schooling in the hospital because, you know, of being stuck in the hospital for 5 weeks. So I had to get caught up on school. I was in middle school at the time. So they got all my work from middle school and brought it to the hospital, and they had a teacher in the hospital, and she got me every single day, and we went and I did homework, which kept me occupied while I was in the hospital alone. I went and did physical therapy, and then there was these people who did, like, they came and got you, and you go and do coloring, you talk and stuff like that, which I got really attached to them because they actually did stuff with me, and I actually had fun doing those stuff with them, and it was better than staying in my hospital bed, doing absolutely nothing. So I got, like, really attached to those people who came and got me and did stuff with me. I didn't really like the hospital food, but I really liked their macaroni and cheese. And there was this, like, cake I had one time. Like, I went down the cafeteria and there was, like, this cake that I had there one time, and it was so good. I would love to have that. Like, if there was anything I could eat in the hospital, was the macaroni and cheese and the cake that I had that one time. But anything else, I could not eat it. It was like, nope. So luckily the doctor's like, oh, you can bring food in to your daughter. So my mom would sometimes cook dinner and bring the dinner to the hospital so I can eat it. I was in the hospital for Thanksgiving. She cooked a full Thanksgiving meal and brought it to the hospital. So yeah, I was in the hospital for 5 weeks, not for 5 months. I'm sorry for getting that wrong, but like seriously, it felt to me like I was in the hospital for 5 months and not 5 weeks. So when my mom told me that, I'm like, what, are you sure? I felt like it was 5 months and not 5 weeks. She's like, yeah, you're only there for 5 weeks, not 5 months. And I'm like, wow. I don't know. I told multiple people, oh, I was in the hospital for 5 months. I was in the hospital for 5 months. And now I feel like I lied to them because, like, I'm like, oh, I was in the hospital for 5 months. But no, in reality, I was in the hospital for 5 weeks. 13 years ago, I was in the hospital and I was diagnosed with transverse myelitis. I've been diagnosed with depression. Yeah, I knew I had it. And I just recently got diagnosed with depression. I decided that I wanted to go see a therapist. And the reason why I wanted to go see a therapist is because I had a lot going on in my life. I wanted to go see one for a long time, but I never had a way to get there. And of course, recently I came in, they're called advocates, and they help you get a ride so you can go and do things and get out into the world more. I was talking to Alyssa, and I don't know how the conversation came up, but the conversation came up and we started talking about my disability and how I felt like I might have depression. And I told her about this one day that was like really bad. Like, it was super bad. I don't know how I survived it, but I did. Well, I think I know how I survived it. But anyway, so she talked about, hey, you wanna go, she's like, hey, you wanna go and see a counselor? And I'm like, yeah, I've been wanting to get back into it, but I never had like a way to get there. So she helped me find a counselor. So I went to see my counselor, and I'm like, I don't know if I have depression or not. And she's like, well, let's talk and I'll tell you what I think. I'm like, okay. So I talked to her, and she's like, it's safe to say you definitely have depression, and it most likely started when you got into the hospital. I'm like, yeah, I figured as much. So I knew I had depression. I don't remember this day exactly. I don't know what happened. I don't know what was going on at that time. But I remember how I felt. I remembered coming into my house being super duper like upset. Like, I really wish I can remember exactly what happened that day, but I don't. But I remember I was out and about. Something happened. Probably something with my mom. I really don't know. I came inside the house. I felt like I was being crushed. Like something was like on top of me, crushing me. That's how bad it was. And I came into the house. I had my jacket on, and I was I was struggling to get this jacket off me. When I finally did, I like chucked it. And I went to go lay on my bed. I didn't even make it to my bed. And I just fell to the floor and sobbed and cried and couldn't breathe at all. I felt like something was like choking me, or like I just couldn't function. And I sat on the ground near my door, near my bedroom door. I like made it like 5 steps in my bedroom before I collapsed onto the ground, because I could not I couldn't handle what was going on. And I think going through whatever that was made me like suppress it, so I wouldn't remember it. Like my brain would like went into like, this is hurting her so bad that I don't want her to remember it, so I'm going to close it off and throw it away, and she's never gonna remember that whatever was hurting me that day. So I don't know what it is because my brain won't physically let me remember it. Anyway, so I was sitting on the ground, and at first I was sitting like kind of like those girls that are like, oh well, it's me, and then they flop on the floor kind of way. Then I changed from that to sitting on my legs like they're underneath my butt, and I was sitting there, and I remember kind of trying to dig at the ground. I don't know why I was digging at the ground, but I was digging at the ground, and I was hyperventilating and crying and sobbing, and all these thoughts were racing through my head, and I just felt like the world around me would just crumple and crush me into the ground. So maybe me digging at the ground was me trying to dig my way out of the situation that was going on at that time. And the one thing that came into my head to get away from the situation that was playing out. Now, warning, this might be a trigger for you. The one thing that popped into my head at the time when I was sitting there sobbing and crying, I thought, hey, you know what's in the bathroom right now? All my pills. Yes, all my pills are in the bathroom. I can get up right now, go into that bathroom, take all of them, that'll be it. It'll be done. And thank God I didn't have the strength to get off the floor that day. Because I don't know if I would be sitting here right now. But I legitimately had no strength in my body to get off the floor and go into the bathroom. But I was sitting there thinking about that, and I'm like, nope, not gonna happen. Because if I do that, I'm gonna destroy people. I'm going to hurt them. I'm going to just rip them apart if I just go in and take all those pills, you know? Because people love me, and I know they do. I know my family loves me. And if I just took me away from them, it would destroy them. It would absolutely destroy them. And I know that. And that's what I was thinking about at that time. Like, oh, I can go in there and take some pills. And I'm like, no. If I do that, I'm going to hurt my mom. I'm going to destroy her. I'm going to rip her heart out. I'm going to ruin her life even more. Her life's already hard enough. She doesn't need a losing of a daughter to add on to what she was going through at that time. Like, thinking on it, like, my mom, she lost her house, she lost her car, her world was spiraling pretty much out of control. And to lose a child in that moment, I don't think she would be able to handle it. And she would have probably done the same thing. She would have probably done the same exact thing, because she was going through so much at that time, and then me to do that would just add fuel to the flame and whatnot. So, but I thought about my mom, I thought about my dad, I thought about my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, I thought about my best friend, and that's what pulled me out of that moment. I'm like, they love me. If I just took me away from them, it would hurt them. It would hurt them a lot. And at that time, I'm like, I need to see someone. I need to see someone about this. And I didn't, because I thought I wouldn't have a way to get there. But I found out later on that I would be able to go see a therapist because I could take a cab or a medical taxi to go to a therapist, but I didn't know that at the time. I would have been seeing this therapist a long while ago if I knew that, but I didn't know that. But yeah, I could have been seeing a therapist this whole entire time, only if I did my research. And I could have been taking a Medicaid cab to go see a therapist. But yeah, but I'm seeing one now. But life is a lot better this year. I felt it. 2019 was gonna be my year, and guess what? It is my year, and it's my mom's year. She's gotten back up on her feet. She has her own place. She has a job. Her life is just going so well now, and my life is going so well right now. I got a way around to go and do stuff, and I get to get out of the house. I'm not always stuck inside the house, and just things are looking up in this year. Everything's looking up this year, and I feel so good about it. But I'm still going to see the therapist because I think I need it still. I just feel like I need someone to talk to, probably to get all the past stuff like situated. I feel like it still lingers, like kind of right here, so I can feel it still. So I feel like I need to see this therapist. Sorry if this video turns out to be really long, but if you guys enjoy this video, give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see all you beautiful night owls in the next video. Goodbye. You